The crystal goblet slipped from Zara Nightvale's trembling fingers, shattering against the marble floor of the grand dining hall. The sound echoed through the opulent chamber like a death knell, and she immediately dropped to her knees, frantically, gathering the glittering shards with her bare hands. "Clumsy fool," Lady Blackmore's voice cut through the air like a blade. "That goblet was worth more than your miserable life." Zara kept her head bowed, her dark hair falling like a curtain around her face. "Forgive me, my lady. I'll replace it. From my wages." "With what wages?" Lady Blackmore's laugh was sharp and cruel. "You'll be working for free until the day you die to pay for your incompetence." As Zara continued to collect the fragments, a drop of blood from her cut palm fell onto one of the larger pieces. The crystal began to glow with an otherworldly light, and for a moment, the shard seemed to repair itself. Zara quickly closed her fist around it, her heart pounding as she glanced up to see if anyone had noticed. Thankfully, the noble family was too engrossed in their evening meal to pay attention to a lowly servant. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Over the past few months, strange occurrences had begun to surround Zara. Wilted flowers would bloom at her touch, minor cuts would heal faster than they should, and sometimes when she was particularly emotional, the air around her would shimmer. With an almost imperceptible energy, she knew what it meant, and it terrified her. Magic had been outlawed in the kingdom of Valvers for over a century. Those caught practicing the forbidden arts faced immediate execution, their bodies burned and their ashes scattered to prevent their spirits from cursing the land. The Purge of Flames, as it was known in the history books, had supposedly cleansed the realm of all magical practitioners, leaving only pure, untainted bloodlines to serve the crown. But Zara was living proof that magic had not been completely eradicated. After cleaning up the broken crystal, she retreated to the servants' quarters, a cramped space beneath the main house where 24 workers lived in conditions barely better than a prison. Her small cot was tucked into a corner, surrounded by thin curtains that provided the illusion of privacy. She pulled them closed and sat on the edge of her bed, examining her cut palm by candlelight. The wound had already begun to close, healing at a rate that defied natural explanation. She traced the fading mark with her finger, wondering not for the first time who her real parents were. The Blackmores had purchased her from an orphanage when she was 5 years old, and she had no memory of her life before that. All she knew was that she had been found as an infant, abandoned on the steps of a temple dedicated to the old gods that were now forbidden to worship. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Zara, may I come in?" She recognized the voice immediately and quickly pulled her sleeve down to cover her healing hand. "Of course, my lord." The curtain parted, and Prince Darian Blackmore stepped into her small space. At 25, he was strikingly handsome, with golden hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see more than they should. Unlike his cold, calculating mother, Darian had always treated the servants with kindness and respect, a trait that had earned him their loyalty and his mother's disapproval. "I saw what happened at dinner," he said, settling onto the small stool beside her bed. "Mother was unnecessarily harsh." Zara shook her head. She was right to be angry. "I was careless." "You're never careless," Darian replied, studying her face in the candlelight. "You're the most careful person I know. What's troubling you?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Zara had served in the Blackmore household for 15 years, and during that time, she and Darian had developed a friendship that transcended their different stations. He was kind, intelligent, and genuinely caring, everything his mother was not. But he was also the prince, heir to a throne built on the suppression of everything she was becoming. "Nothing, my lord," she said finally, "just tired." Darian frowned, clearly not believing her, but before he could press further, the sound of shouting erupted from the main house. They both froze, listening as panic seemed to spread through the estate like wildfire. "What's happening?" Zara whispered. Darian was already moving toward the door. "I don't know, but we need to find out." They rushed through the corridors, following the sounds of chaos to the main entrance hall. Servants scattered in all directions as armed figures in dark clothing moved through the house. With deadly precision, these weren't common thieves. They moved with the trained efficiency of professional assassins. Darien. Lady Blackmore's voice carried across the hall, filled with terror. They're here for you. One of the assassins turned at the sound of her voice, his blade already drawn. Zara watched in horror as he raised his weapon, preparing to strike down the prince who had shown her the only kindness she had ever known. Time seemed to slow. She could see the blade descending, could see the inevitability of Darien's death, written in the assassin's cold eyes. Something deep within her chest seemed to crack open, and power flooded through her veins like liquid fire. No. The word tore from her throat as she threw herself between Darien and the assassin. The blade should have pierced her heart, but instead, it struck an invisible barrier and shattered like glass. The assassin stumbled backward, his eyes wide with shock and something else recognition. Impossible. He breathed. The bloodline was destroyed. Zara stood frozen, her hands glowing with silvery light that seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. The air around her shimmered and danced, and every person in the hall stared at her with a mixture of awe and terror. Zara. Darien whispered behind her, his voice filled with wonder rather than fear. You're a sorceress, the assassin finished, his voice filled with dark satisfaction. The last of the old blood. More assassins appeared from the shadows, but now their attention was focused entirely on Zara. She could see the hunger in their eyes, the anticipation of completing a hunt that had lasted over a century. Capture her alive, their leader commanded. The Emperor will want to see this for himself. Zara's power flickered and wavered as panic set in. She had no training, no understanding of what she was or how to control the energy coursing through her. All she knew was that she had revealed herself to save Darien, and now both of their lives hung in the balance. I won't let you hurt him, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. The lead assassin smiled coldly. You're untrained, girl. Your power is nothing but wild emotion. You can't stop us all. He was right, and she knew it. But as the assassins began to advance, Zara made a decision that would change everything. She reached deep within herself, grasping for every scrap of power she could find, and prepared to make a stand. The last sorceress of Valdris would not go quietly into the night. Behind her, she heard Darien draw his sword, ready to fight beside her despite the impossible odds. In that moment, she realized that her greatest fear wasn't dying, it was losing the only person who had ever truly seen her as more than just a servant. The battle for their lives was about to begin. The underground tunnels beneath Valdris stretched like veins through the earth, carrying the lifeblood of rebellion through passages carved centuries ago by forgotten hands. Marcus Ashford moved through these shadows with the fluid grace of someone who had made darkness his ally, his boots silent against the worn stone as he navigated toward the heart of their hidden stronghold. At 28, Marcus bore the scars of a man who had fought too many battles against impossible odds. A jagged line ran from his left temple to his jaw, parting gift from a royal guard's blade 3 years prior. His dark hair was perpetually disheveled, and his green eyes held the intensity of someone who had seen too much injustice to ever find peace and submission. The ancient chamber that served as their meeting hall had once been a temple to the old gods, its walls still bearing faded murals of winged beings and mystical creatures that the current regime had tried to erase from history. Now it housed 37 souls who refused to bow to tyranny, each one carrying their own reasons for joining the resistance. The reports from the Blackmore estate are confirmed, announced Tobias, Marcus's second-in-command. As the gathered rebels fell silent, a sorceress revealed herself during an assassination attempt. The royal guard has cordoned off the entire district. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. For 5 years, he had been searching for any sign that magic still existed in their world. The resistance needed something, anything, that could level the playing field against the Emperor's overwhelming military might. Survivors? He asked. Unknown. The estate is under lockdown, but our contacts report seeing prison wagons heading toward the capital. Marcus's jaw tightened. He had witnessed too many innocent people disappear into the Emperor's dungeons, never to emerge. If this sorceress was real, she wouldn't survive long enough to be executed publicly. The Emperor would want to study her, to understand how magic had managed to survive his purge. "I'm going in," Marcus declared, ignoring the immediate protests from his followers. "It's suicide," said Helena, their weapons master. "The entire city guard is on high alert. One person can't. One person is exactly what we need," Marcus interrupted. "A small infiltration team would be spotted. A full assault would be slaughter. But one person, moving alone." He paused, his mind already calculating routes and possibilities. One person might slip through their net. What he couldn't say was that this felt personal in a way he couldn't explain. Something about the idea of a young woman facing the Emperor's wrath alone stirred memories he had spent years trying to bury, memories of his sister Elena, who had possessed the gift of foresight and had paid the ultimate price for it. 2 hours later, Marcus emerged from a drainage tunnel 6 blocks from the Blackmore estate. The streets were eerily quiet, patrolled by guards in the black and silver uniforms of the Imperial Watch. He had traded his usual leather armor for the simple brown robes of a traveling merchant, complete with forged identification papers that would pass casual inspection. The estate itself was a fortress of activity. Guards surrounded the perimeter while investigators combed through every room, searching for evidence of magical contamination. Marcus positioned himself in the shadows of a nearby alley, watching and waiting for an opportunity. It came in the form of a servant's cart being wheeled away from the property. The young man pushing it looked terrified, his hands shaking as guards inspected his cargo of linens and kitchen supplies. Marcus recognized the expression. It was the look of someone who had witnessed something that challenged everything they believed about the world. Following at a discreet distance, Marcus tracked the servant to a small tavern 3 streets away. The man sat alone at a corner table, staring into a mug of ale that he hadn't touched. Marcus approached carefully, sliding into the seat across from him. "Rough day at work?" Marcus asked casually. The servant looked up, his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion and fear. "You don't understand. None of us understand. She was just Zara. Quiet little Zara, who never hurt anyone." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Zara, the sorceress," the man whispered, glancing around nervously. "But she wasn't evil. She saved Prince Darian's life. The light that came from her hands, it wasn't dark or twisted. It was beautiful, like starlight made solid. Where is she now? Gone. They took her and the prince both. Said they were contaminated, needed to be cleansed." The servant's voice broke. 20 years I've worked for that family. 20 years. And I never knew she was what she was. But it doesn't matter, does it? She's as good as dead now." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. The prince was taken to, said he'd been exposed to magical influence, might be under an enchantment. The man finally took a sip of his ale. "Though between you and me, the only enchantment Prince Darian was under was being a decent human being in a family of vipers." Marcus absorbed this information, his mind racing. A royal hostage changed everything. The Emperor couldn't simply execute his own nephew without cause, which meant there might be a window of opportunity, however small. "Thank you," Marcus said, placing a coin on the table. "For what it's worth, I don't think your Zara is as powerless as everyone believes." The servant looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" But Marcus was already moving, disappearing into the crowd before the man could process what he had said. He had what he needed: names, locations, and most importantly, hope. The journey back to the underground stronghold took longer than usual, as Marcus was forced to take circuitous routes to avoid the increased patrols. By the time he reached the hidden chamber, his followers had gathered for the evening meal, their faces grim with the weight of their perpetual struggle. "Change of plans," Marcus announced, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "We're not just looking for sorcerers anymore. We're mounting a rescue operation." The protests began immediately, but Marcus raised his hand for silence. "Listen to me. This girl Zara, she's untrained, probably terrified, and definitely powerful. Right now, she's more dangerous to herself than to anyone else. But with proper guidance, with training, you're talking about turning her into a weapon," observed Father Gabriel, an elderly priest who had joined their cause after witnessing the burning of his temple. "I'm talking about giving her a choice," Marcus corrected. "The same choice we all made when we decided to fight back instead of accepting oppression." Helena crossed her arms. And if she chooses not to help us, Marcus was quiet for a moment, remembering the servant's description of light like starlight made solid. Then we help her anyway, because it's the right thing to do. That night, as his followers prepared for sleep, Marcus stood alone in the depths of the chamber, studying an ancient map of the Imperial prison complex. The building was a fortress, designed to be impregnable, but every fortress had weaknesses, and Marcus had made a career of finding them. What troubled him wasn't the tactical challenge, it was the unfamiliar emotion stirring in his chest. Whenever he thought about the young sorceress, he had heard the servant's description, had seen the wonder in the man's eyes when he spoke of her sacrifice to save Prince Darien. Everything about her story spoke of someone who possessed not just power, but the strength of character to use it for others. It had been 3 years since Marcus had allowed himself to feel anything beyond the cold determination necessary to lead a rebellion. 3 years since he had buried his heart alongside his sister's memory. But something about Zara's story had awakened feelings he thought were dead. "You're falling for someone you've never met," he murmured to himself, tracing the prison's outline with his finger. Elena would have laughed at you for that. But even as he acknowledged the foolishness of it, Marcus found himself planning not just a rescue, but a future. He imagined teaching Zara to control her abilities, watching her grow from a frightened servant into a powerful ally. He imagined conversations by firelight, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams of their future. Most dangerously of all, he imagined what it might feel like to love someone again and to be loved in return. The rescue would happen in 3 days, during the changing of the guard at dawn. It was ambitious, possibly suicidal, and would require every favor Marcus had accumulated over 5 years of careful intelligence gathering. But as he rolled up the map and prepared for what might be his final night of freedom, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years: anticipation for tomorrow, and hope that it might bring something better than mere survival. Somewhere in the depths of the Imperial prison, a sorceress named Zara was waiting for rescue, unaware that her salvation would come in the form of a rebel who was already half in love with her courage. The game was about to change, and Marcus Ashford intended to win. The Imperial prison rose from the heart of Valdris like a blackened tooth, its obsidian walls reflecting no light even under the harsh afternoon sun. Prince Darien Blackmore stood at the barred window of his cell, watching the city sprawl beneath him with eyes that had seen too much in the span of 3 days. His cell was luxurious by prison standards, a concession to his royal blood that his uncle, Emperor Thaddeus, had grudgingly allowed. Rich tapestries covered the stone walls, and a proper bed replaced the straw pallets that other prisoners endured. But luxury could not disguise the fact that he was a captive, his fate hanging in the balance of political calculations he was only beginning to understand. Still brooding, nephew. Darien turned as Emperor Thaddeus entered the cell, flanked by 2 guards in ceremonial armor. At 53, the Emperor remained an imposing figure despite the gray threading through his dark hair. His face bore the sharp angles of their shared bloodline. But where Darien's expression held warmth and compassion, Thaddeus radiated cold calculation. "Uncle," Darien said formally, not bothering to bow, "have you come to explain why the heir to your throne is imprisoned like a common criminal?" Thaddeus waved the guards away and settled into one of the carved chairs that furnished the cell. "You were exposed to magical influence, Darien. The corruption could have taken root in your mind, made you susceptible to enchantment. This is for your own protection." "Protection from what?" "From Zara." Darien's voice hardened. "She saved my life, uncle. Whatever else she is, she's not my enemy." "Ah, yes, the sorceress." Thaddeus's tone became thoughtful. "Tell me about her, nephew. How long have you known what she was?" The question hung in the air like a trap. Darien had spent 3 sleepless nights considering this moment, knowing that his answer could determine not only his own fate, but Zara's as well. The truth was that he had suspected something was different about Zara for months. Small inconsistencies that made sense only in hindsight. "I didn't know," he said finally. "Not until she revealed herself to save me." Thaddeus studied his nephew's face with the shrewd gaze of a man who had built an empire on reading the lies of others. "You're certain no strange occurrences around her? No inexplicable events that might suggest magical influence?" Darien forced himself to remain calm, even as memories flooded his mind. The way flowers seemed to bloom more vibrantly in gardens where Zara worked, how she always knew exactly what to say when he was troubled, as if she could sense his emotional state. The curious fact that she never seemed to fall ill, despite working in all weather. Nothing, he lied smoothly. She was just a servant, a kind one, but nothing more. Thaddeus leaned back, his expression unreadable. Kindness can be the most dangerous magic of all. Nephew, it makes us lower our defenses, trust where we should suspect. He paused, watching Darien carefully. The girl will be executed tomorrow at dawn. A public demonstration of what happens to those who practice the forbidden arts. The words hit Darien like a physical blow, but he fought to keep his reaction hidden. She's just a child, uncle, barely 20 years old. Old enough to wield power that could topple kingdoms, Thaddeus replied. You didn't see what I saw in the interrogation chamber, Darien. Raw, untrained magic crackling around her like lightning. If someone were to teach her control, to focus that power. He shook his head. She could level this prison with a thought. Darien's blood ran cold. You tortured her, questioned, Thaddeus corrected. Though I admit the distinction becomes blurred when dealing with magical subjects. The girl is remarkably resilient. She's revealed nothing about potential allies or training. Because there's nothing to reveal, Darien said through gritted teeth. She's been a servant her entire life. She knows nothing about magic or politics or anything beyond keeping house. Thaddeus stood, smoothing his imperial robes. Perhaps, but I can't take that risk. He moved toward the door, then paused. There is, however, an alternative. Darien's heart raced, but he kept his voice level. What kind of alternative? Marry Lady Vivian Hartwell next month, as originally planned, publicly denounce the sorceress, and support her execution. Prove to the people that their future king is untainted by magical corruption. Thaddeus turned to face him fully. Do this, and I might be persuaded that a swift beheading would be more merciful than the burning traditional lie reserved for witches. The offer hung between them like a poison chalice. Lady Vivian was the daughter of the Empire's most powerful duke, a union that would cement political alliances and secure trade routes. It was also a marriage Darien had been dreading for months, not because Vivian was cruel or unpleasant, but because she wasn't Zara. The realization struck him with startling clarity. Somewhere in the 15 years of shared conversations, stolen moments in garden alcoves, and quiet companionship, he had fallen in love with a servant girl. The knowledge should have horrified him, should have made him question his fitness to rule. Instead, it only strengthened his resolve. I need time to consider, he said carefully. Thaddeus smiled, the expression cold and satisfied. Of course, you have until sunset tomorrow. Choose wisely, nephew. Your decision will determine not only your future, but the stability of the realm. After the Emperor left, Darien paced his luxurious cage like a trapped wolf. The political mathematics were inescapable. His cooperation would buy Zara a marginally less agonizing death, while his refusal would likely result in both their executions. A rational prince would accept the bargain, marry the duke's daughter, and mourn the servant girl's sacrifice in private. But Darien found that love had made him distinctly irrational. That evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, a commotion in the courtyard below drew his attention. A small group of prisoners was being led across the yard in chains, and among them, Darien spotted a familiar figure. Zara moved with the same quiet grace he remembered, though her servant's dress had been replaced by a rough prison shift, and her dark hair hung loose around her shoulders. Even from a distance, even weakened by days of interrogation, she carried herself with a dignity that made his chest ache. As if sensing his gaze, she looked up toward his window. Their eyes met across the distance, and for a moment, the stone walls and iron bars seemed to dissolve. She lifted her hand slightly, barely more than a twitch of her fingers, but he understood the gesture. It was the same small wave she had given him countless times when passing in the corridors of his family's estate. In that instant, Darien made his choice. He began examining his cell with new eyes, noting details he had previously ignored. The window bars were thick but old, secured with mortar that centuries of weather had gradually weakened. The tapestries could be woven into rope. Most importantly, his royal status meant he was housed in the tower's middle levels high enough to be secure, but not so high as to make escape impossible. As the night deepened, Darien set to work. He had been trained in strategy and tactics by the Empire's finest military minds, but they had never imagined he would use those skills to plan his own escape. Working in near silence, he began loosening the window bars, using the metal clasps from his ceremonial belt as makeshift tools. The work was slow and exhausting, his soft hands soon bleeding from the effort. But with each scrape of metal against stone, he thought of Zera facing the executioner's block alone, and his determination only grew stronger. By midnight, he had created enough space to squeeze through the window. The drop to the courtyard was significant but survivable if he could reach the sloped roof of the guard tower. From there, he could access the external walls and make his way to the prison's lower levels, where Zera was likely being held. It was insane. It was treasonous. It would mean abandoning his birthright, his duty to his people, and any hope of legitimate power. But as Darien squeezed through the gap in the window bars and began his descent into the darkness below, he felt more like a true prince than he ever had, sitting in throne rooms debating policy. A prince's first duty was to protect those who couldn't protect themselves, and that duty transcended politics, bloodlines, and even empires. Above him, the constellation Cassiopeia glittered in the clear night sky, the same stars Zera had been watching from his window when she first called him beloved. Soon, if his courage held, they would stand beneath those stars together, free to write their own destiny. The prince had chosen love over duty, and the realm would never be the same. In the deepest chambers of the imperial prison, where even the guards whispered their prayers before venturing, Mira Stormwind knelt in meditation among shadows that seemed to pulse with their own life. At 41, she possessed an ageless beauty that spoke of power. Carefully contained silver-streaked auburn hair that caught light like spun metal, and violet eyes that held depths no mortal gaze should contain. For 23 years, she had hidden in plain sight among the nobility as Lady Mira Ravencrest, widow of a minor lord, patron of the arts, and collector of ancient artifacts. In truth, she was the last trained sorceress of the old bloodlines, keeper of secrets that predated the Empire itself, and guardian of a sacred duty that had shaped every moment of her carefully constructed life. The magical wards she had woven throughout the prison, over years of careful visits ostensibly to minister to political prisoners, as part of her charitable works, now sang to her of approaching danger. Two distinct magical signatures moved through the complex, one wild and untrained, flickering like an unsteady flame, and another that carried the disciplined power of someone born to rule. Zera and Darien were both in motion, their fates rushing toward a convergence that could either doom them all or herald the restoration of the old ways. Mira rose from her meditation and approached the seemingly solid wall of her hidden chamber. Ancient runes carved into the stone began to glow at her touch, revealing a concealed alcove filled with artifacts that the Empire believed destroyed. Crystalline orbs that contained the distilled essence of starlight, a staff carved from the heartwood of the world tree, and most precious of all, a small vial of liquid that shimmered with rainbow colors. The tears of Etheria, the last drops of pure magical essence from the realm that existed before the physical world. Her grandmother had died protecting this single vial during the Purge of Flames, and Mira had guarded it for 2 decades, waiting for the moment when the prophecies would be fulfilled. That moment had arrived 3 days ago, when an untrained servant girl had revealed powers that should have been impossible to manifest. Without guidance, Mira carefully lifted the vial, feeling the incredible power contained within its delicate crystal walls. The liquid seemed to respond to her touch, swirling faster as if eager to fulfill its destiny. But the price of using it would be everything she was, everything she had been, and everything she might become. The blood of the old lines runs thin, she whispered to the empty chamber, reciting words passed down through generations of hidden guardians. But in the darkest hour, one shall rise to kindle the light anew. The teacher's sacrifice shall awaken the student's power, and magic shall return to heal the broken world. A distant explosion echoed through the prison complex, followed by the harsh clanging of alarm bells. Mira smiled grimly. Marcus Ashford's rebellion had begun their assault right on schedule. The distraction would provide the cover she needed for what came next. She pressed her hand against another section of the wall, and a hidden passage opened, leading through forgotten maintenance tunnels toward the heart of the prison. Years of careful exploration had mapped every secret route, every hidden chamber, every weakness in the supposedly impregnable fortress. As she moved through the darkness, Mira's thoughts turned to the young woman she had been secretly watching for months. From the moment Zara had first set foot in the capital city, magical resonance had drawn Mira's attention like a beacon. The girl's power was unprecedented not just in its raw strength, but in its nature. Where traditional magic required careful study and precise control, Zara's abilities seemed to flow from pure emotion and instinct. It was exactly what the old prophecies had described. The passage ended at a grated opening that overlooked the prison's central courtyard. Below, chaos reigned as Marcus's rebels engaged the guard forces in running battles through the maze of cell blocks. Smoke and flame painted the night in shades of amber and crimson, while the clash of steel on steel echoed off the ancient stones. Mira could sense Zara's location 3 levels down, in the isolation cells reserved for the most dangerous prisoners. But between the courtyard and those cells lay a gauntlet of guards, magical detection wards, and security measures that had been designed to prevent exactly what she was attempting. She had one advantage that the prison's architects hadn't considered. She had helped design some of those wards herself 23 years ago, when she had still been masquerading as a loyal imperial advisor, drawing power from the crystalline focus pendant hidden beneath her simple gray dress. Mira began to weave a complex illusion. To any observer, she would appear to be nothing more than a trick of shadow and lamplighted distraction of the eye that would let her pass unnoticed. Through the chaos below, the spell settled around her like a gossamer cloak, and she descended into the maelstrom. Moving through the battle was like dancing between raindrops, a matter of timing, intuition, and absolute faith in her abilities. Guards rushed past her, without a second glance, their attention focused on the very real threats posed by Marcus's fighters. She slipped through defensive lines that should have been impenetrable, her magic subtly influencing perception and memory. The isolation cells occupied the lowest level of the prison, carved directly into the bedrock beneath the city. Here, the air itself seemed thick with despair and forgotten dreams. But as Mira approached Zara's cell, she felt something else, a warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. The young sorceress sat cross-legged on the stone floor, her eyes closed in meditation. Despite 3 days of interrogation and the looming threat of execution, she radiated a calm that spoke of inner strength beyond her years. Her dark hair fell around her shoulders like a curtain, but Mira could see the faint silver light that played around her fingertips. "Hello, child," Mira said softly, allowing her illusion to fade as she approached the cell door. Zara's eyes opened, revealing depths of compassion that made Mira's heart ache with recognition. This was why the prophecies had spoken of her, not just for her power, but for the purity of spirit that would guide that power toward healing rather than destruction. "You're not a guard," Zara observed, rising gracefully to her feet. "And you're not here to rescue me, are you?" Mira smiled, impressed by the girl's perceptiveness. "I am here to give you what you need to rescue yourself and everyone else." She placed her hand on the lock, and it clicked open with a soft whisper of displaced metal. "My name is Mira Stormwind, and I've been waiting my entire life to meet you." As the cell door swung open, Zara stepped forward cautiously. "I don't understand. Who are you?" "I am what you will become, with proper guidance," Mira replied, producing the vial of tears of Etheria. The liquid within pulsed with its own light, casting rainbow patterns on the stone walls. "And I am what you must sacrifice to achieve your true potential." Zara stared at the vial, and Mira could see the girl's untrained magical senses responding to the power contained within. That's pure magic, isn't it? Older than the Empire, older than the kingdoms that came before, the last of its kind," Mira confirmed. "Created when the world was young and magic flowed like rivers through the land. One drop will awaken abilities you never dreamed possible. The entire vial." She paused, meeting Zara's gaze directly. The entire vial will make you powerful enough to change the world. What's the price? Zara asked quietly. There's always a price for power like that. Mira felt tears gathering in her eyes, tears she had thought herself incapable of shedding after so many years of careful emotional control. The price is that you'll have to watch someone who cares about you die to make it possible. Understanding dawned in Zara's expression, followed immediately by fierce denial. No, I won't let you sacrifice yourself for me. There has to be another way. There's no other way, Mira said gently. The magic requires a willing sacrifice, freely given by one who understands the cost. I've known this day would come since I was younger than you are now. She reached out and cupped Zara's face in her free hand. And I've never been more certain of anything in my life. In the distance, the sounds of battle were growing closer. Soon, the fighting would reach this level, and their window of opportunity would close forever. The young man who loves you is fighting his way toward us even now, Mira continued, and the prince who would die for you is somewhere in this prison, defying an empire for the chance to save you. You have people worth saving, child, a world worth healing. Zara's composure finally cracked, tears streaming down her face. I don't know how to be what you think I am. I'm just a servant girl who doesn't understand any of this. You'll learn, Mira assured her, pressing the vial into Zara's trembling hands. Trust your heart, not your training. You have none of the latter, but more of the former than anyone I've ever met. The magical focus pendant at Mira's throat began to pulse brighter as she drew upon her life force to activate the ancient ritual. Pain lanced through her body, but she embraced it, knowing that each moment of agony was purchasing Zara's future. Remember, she whispered as silver light began to pour from her skin. Magic is not about power, it's about connection. To the earth, to the sky, to every living thing that shares this world with us. Rule with love, not fear. And you'll never lose your way. Mira's body